Hi, I'm Austin Clark, and today I'm going to be French polishing this F5 that I've recently sanded out. This does have an oil varnish underlayer. Uh, Once I built up enough finish to make a final smooth sanding, sanded it out fully with Norton black ice paper. The stuff is very, very fine. It is wet sanded. And you do have to get out all scratches. You can't leave little tiny things in there because they will show. That's not the purpose of the way we're French polishing. You can French polish an instrument up from scratch without having an under finish on it. But that's kind of a little bit different technique than what we're doing here. So I've got a few materials on hand. I've got walnut oil that I just keep in a little bottle. A very, very light cut of shellac. This is probably under a 1 pound cut. I think it's just kind of the color of ginger ale, maybe. We've got a little pad we use, which is a little small woolen pad that I've been using for many years. Same pad, just keep it in a little Tupperware and keep it moist with alcohol. We're going to wrap it in a little piece of old t-shirt. It's been well washed, fairly lint-free. Maybe there's a little bit on there. So first thing to do is to charge the pad. Put a few drops of alcohol right on the muñeca, which is what you call the little wool thingy. And since this is the first pass, I can be a little heavier on the alcohol than I would normally. So I like to use a little pad of paper to see how wet my blot is. These look a little wet. I like to see just a light print, so I'll pat it on here until it's a little lighter. There we go. This is more of what I'm looking for. This is too wet. This is about right. I don't know if you can see that. Now that that's charged, I'm going to add a little bit of oil to the back of my hand. All it takes is enough to lubricate it on the instrument. If you get too much oil on there, you start building ridges and too much texture. So I kind of like to use just a little bit. And since the pad's a little wetter than I'd normally start with, I'm going to go ahead and just cover the instrument with big wipes. I don't know if you can see it here, but it evaporates off almost as quickly as I go across. And if you have too much oil, you can't see that happening, so it's hard to tell if you've got it on. Can't really go back over exactly what you just did, so it kind of spread it out over the instrument. So as the shellac dries, you can move along and do it again. Okay, so I've got a little bit on the whole instrument now. So I think we can really charge the pad and start working individual areas. So rather than working the whole instrument at one time, I'm going to start in a region like the scroll or the top, and I'll work small areas and work my way across the instrument and then blend it all back together. So again, I'm going to check this. This is pretty wet. So I generally suggest a fairly dry pad, but once you get more experienced with it, you can use a wetter pad. You just have to make bigger motions and don't press as hard. So we're going to start out here. And I'm not going to go circular yet because the pad's a little wet, and circular tends to build up little ridges from the pad if it's too wet. But as it dries out, we'll switch to circular motions and then finish up with straight. So as you start to feel it grab or leave prints, you can add just a drop or two of oil, blot it on the back of my hand. All right, let's start making some circles here. By the end of this process, we'll be using lots of pressure, pressing remarkably hard. Right now, I'm just gradually increasing as I go, as the shellac is used up in the pad. It does not take a lot, and the pad seems to hold plenty. Some people I know put their alcohol and their shellac and their walnut oil together in the bottle and just shake it up, but I like to control the oil a little bit more, or how much I use, because there's less to clean off at the end. Okay, now I'm really starting to increase pressure now. Got to really work the recurve area on a mandolin. Sometimes the pad just doesn't want to release its shellac in the little tight curves, so the scroll takes a lot of work. Now if I were to stop the pad, it would leave a little mark, which I'd then have to come back and sand out again with some of that 2000 grit paper. It doesn't take a lot, but it's best to just deal with those things as they arise. Now at this point, I've also filled any little holes that might have been along the binding edge. I don't care how good at finishing and finish prep you are, you're going to have some little stuff to deal with before you start your final stages of finish work. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. I think we're going to move on to the second half. Periodically, I'll just buff the oil off with the heel of my hand so I can see how it's coming along. It looks pretty good so far. First time I go over the instrument, I'll frequently change my my t-shirt material. I don't know why, but it seems to help. As I get to the final stages, and I do this for 4 days, once a day basically, you can actually use the same one for the whole instrument. Yeah, it's a nice looking blot. I think we'll start with circles this time. So there's no real one way of doing this. Everybody seems to do it a little bit differently. This is just the way that I do it. I pretty much use straight shellac, mostly because I want it to retain a little bit of flexibility. And I think some of the adjuncts that can be added to it, using like a 1704 type varnish, is good if you're building up the whole instrument with shellac, because it's a little bit harder and it's consistent. But if you put something really hard over the oil varnish, then it's going to cause craquelure, little fractures and cracks in the finish as the finish continues to cure underneath it. Which, that said too, it's super important that you get this on very, very thin. Otherwise, if it's too thick, again, it's going to crack on you. It's got to be just a micro thin layer. I'm putting a lot of pressure on it now. So, to do an entire instrument, well, mandolin anyway, it takes about probably 45 minutes the first session, and then maybe about 30 minutes each session after that for about 4 or 5 days. I like to do one session a day and let it fully harden in between sessions, because if you get your pad too wet, you can start pulling the shellac off too. So it's good that it's got a little bit more cure in it before you really go to town. also important to stand where you can see, have a good side light going on the instrument so you can see the haze that builds up from the oil and the shellac and how it behaves. Wish I could tell you exactly how to do it, but it is kind of a touchy-feely thing and a bit fidgety to get the right hang of. But do it enough, you'll find your way in a way that works for you. But remember, the main thing is it's not there to fill holes. The finish should already be perfectly smooth, level, without any flaws. This is just putting that antique-y, shiny glow back onto it. In theory, you can buff out the oil varnish, but I really don't like that look. It's kind of glaring, and this looks the best to me. And we're all kind of pretty sure that this is the way Lloyd Lohr and those guys were doing this at Gibson in the 20s. So, of course, it's the way to go, right? All right, this is looking pretty good for the first round of the back. All right, it's a nice looking piece of wood anyway. Helps a lot. Next to the top.